In terms of pathologists, what are pathologists? Pathologists study the causes of diseases, okay, and the way they affect the body, okay. Changes of tissue. They basically study the blood. They study the interpretation of blood. They figure out what the final diagnosis is. That's what pathologists do, okay. Pathologists don't typically see patients, but they're involved in patient care, okay, because once that pathologist makes that final diagnosis, that's going to affect the patient. So that's what pathologists do. And I'm just giving you a quick overview. So, for example, you can review blood tests of a pregnant woman, to make sure her baby is born healthy. Okay, you review all the labs, for example. You look at slides. Okay, you look under the microscope. You determine if a patient needs transplant. So, for example, um, if this is a slide of this is the kidney actually, and you can see a lot of neutrophils and lymphocytes around here. So, for example, a lot of the time you have to do a biopsy of the kidney to determine if a patient is eligible for a transplant. And you're in the far front of that, and you have to look at that slide very carefully. You have to evaluate. You have to go into detail, and you also have to kind of take the patient in consideration as well. So it's an overall thing. Um, and also the cancer diagnoses. Okay, you're able to you're the person who tells the patient or tells the other physician that is the patient in remission now by doing more biopsies and what type of cancer it is. For example, if a patient has you have to differentiate between squamous cell cancer and basal cell cancer. You're going to have to see if a margin's affected. When the surgeon brings the specimen to you, you're going to have to evaluate that specimen grossly, but at the same time, you're going to have to take a section of that tissue, put it under the microscope, and say, okay, that margin is not affected. You're done. You don't need to cut in more into the patient. And then, of course, you're going to be doing autopsies as a resident, as a pathology resident. That's one of the biggest things you do all the time. You got to figure out why the person died. Is it because of a natural cause, or is it because of something else happened? Maybe a drug overdose, a foul play, whatever it is. So patients will request autopsies if they're not too sure, and if they want to figure out what the cause of death is. So you'll be performing a lot of autopsies if you do pathology.